Mina Kimes and her dog Lenny do a podcast together if you want maximum football information, where she totally geeks out on all of the minutia that will make you learn football and enjoy all the things the wonderful Mina Kimes is. The Mina Kimes Show with Lenny is something that you should check out. I have a couple of coaching questions for you. The first I have, because Mike Florio is going out after Adam Schefter on what he's calling irresponsible reporting around Ben Johnson. That's not the part I find most interesting. The part I find most interesting is that Ben Johnson was reportedly seeking $15 million a year, and the Seattle job and the Washington job seem imperfect, so he goes back as offensive coordinator to the Lions. What do you think really happened here?
It's a really good question because there's so much smoke around a decision like this, especially the fact that it's not just happened one year, but the prior year, right? Ben Johnson was a head coaching candidate last year. There was a lot of buzz about him in Carolina. He goes back to Detroit. That kind of made sense because we were like, I don't know how good the Carolina job is. Go back, build your resume, you have your choice. Then this year, he seems to have his choice. So for him to go back again is curious. And I think, to say that he is going back because he just loves Detroit and he's so loyal and he wants to win a Super Bowl and screw those other teams, I have my doubts about that. And I think it's plausible maybe those jobs weren't on the table for him, the ones at the end that he wanted. Perhaps money was a factor. It's impossible to know exactly whether it was like I'm going to dump you before you dump me situation with him. I do think, however, and Dominique and I talked to us about this a little bit on my show earlier this week, while it might not be that he returned to Detroit purely because out of the goodness of his heart or his love of the Lions and his desire to win a Super Bowl, it is undeniable that it is a good job. I don't know what he's making there, but I suspect it's a lot. I suspect he likes working for Dan Campbell. He has total autonomy over the offense. I think all those things are true without knowing exactly what the money piece was.
I'm not going to tell you anything about the personnel you're getting. I just tell Mina Kimes, you're starting a franchise right now. Of all the coaches who are available, everyone, coordinators, everyone, your top 3 people that you believe are so innovative that you absolutely must start with them.
She's going to sound like a homer here.
You think so?
But she's been touting Mike Macdonald since the beginning, though.
Yeah, but I'd be crazy. Dan, you're asking me to pick from the current
everybody. I'm saying you're starting right now.
And so she'll go like Shanahan. I'm not going to speak for you anymore.
Oh, okay, Mike. You want to answer the question?
Mansplaining to Mina football things.
Well, I think Dan, I just think it's a lot less interesting if you go with the current crop of head coaches because those answers are obvious.
It's clear. It's Andy Reid. It's Kyle Shanahan, who also obviously, not just because they're the 2 coaches in the Super Bowl, but because of their innovativeness in terms of offense and the fact that they've clearly done a good job for so long. I would say this. I love John Harbaugh. I'm a huge fan of his, but I do think Sean McVay might be my third because I was so impressed by what he did this year. The way that offense has evolved. This was a team, the Los Angeles Rams, that I didn't think would be competitive. Now, some of that was because I didn't know what version of Matthew Stafford we would get, and he came back and was awesome coming back from the elbow injury. But I really think McVay deserves a ton of credit for the way he's navigated hardship and the way he's onboarded new players. And if you're asking me the question, okay, building from nothing, or rather, with a huge question mark in personnel, I like what he's done so far, and it gives me confidence that he could replicate the same thing with whatever happens.
And he's also found a way with his progressive hiring practices to help the team's draft capital situation by just an incredible eye for talent and an ability to develop them.
Yeah, he has, we do Friends of McVay as a joke, but I'm glad, Mike, you make a good point. I think we have associated that with, it's just the young, hot, white offensive coordinator of the week. But that's not true, as we're seeing this cycle with Raheem Morris getting that head coaching job after being a defensive coordinator. And I'll say this about Raheem Morris, too. Not every team is so aggressive in promoting the coaches on their staff. I think the Rams, now, there's obviously a benefit with the draft picks for sure. But I think there's a true belief there that we want our young coaches to succeed.
Mina, for years, the hot name of the assistant who hasn't been a head coach yet has been Eric Bieniemy. And then last year, kind of surprisingly, he goes to the lateral move to go to Washington. Washington has a job opening. His name really isn't mentioned much in that, and now it's gone to someone else, and all the jobs are filled. What happened to Eric Bieniemy? I thought he was the hot name. Why is he not the hot name anymore?
It's a good question. A lot of it is just that the offense wasn't successful this year. I would pin most of that on the quarterback, or, the lack of answers when it came to the quarterback position. You get a hot start with Sam Howell. As the year goes on, he has his ups and downs. He's injured at some points, holds on to the football very long, takes a lot of sacks, a lot of negative plays. And how much of that you want to pin on, Howell versus Bieniemy not, I guess changing those habits or getting him to evolve as a quarterback. I think that's a reasonable criticism. I would also say this. There were stories this year about the management side of things. You had players, I wouldn't say being outright critical of Bieniemy's leadership style, but you guys remembered there were stories about some friction in Washington. And I think from ownership standpoint, when you're looking at head coaches, that probably factored in. I don't know. I can't speak to, how he actually is as a leader, but I would contrast it with, again, go back into the Raheem Morris hire, or maybe the Brian Callahan hire, where you have so many players and so many coaches speaking on behalf of them and talking about what great leaders they are and how much they've helped them. You haven't really had that coming out of Washington.
Let me ask you this, because Mike had it right when he dansplained there, and it did make it more predictable when I went all coaches. Among the schemers, the Macdonalds and the McDaniel, among the Ben Johnsons, give me your top three people who are going to create a schematic advantage, and therefore I want to start with whatever it is they bring in terms of innovation.
Okay. Well, I would still go with Kyle Shanahan. There. So we're talking existing coaches?
I'm talking about
the next crop.
Coordinators. You got Macdonald. They just went in Seattle. Okay. They just went half as young. Pete Carroll was 72. Yeah. I don't know what's too young, but they've got a 36-year-old coach in Seattle now because he's supposed to be a mastermind.
You know what's interesting about that? I'll give you a name that is a guy who I don't think was associated with any head coaching jobs this cycle. I don't believe he interviewed, and you didn't hear his name, and that's Steve Spagnuolo. It was funny, the AFC Championship, I was thinking, oh my God, it was a display of defense. I think we can all agree. And I was thinking, oh my God, Spagnuolo's been in the league forever. Mike Macdonald is 36 and he's the hot young thing. And probably both of these guys are my top two when it comes to defense in the NFL right now, which is, I think, kind of cool. It shows you it's not really about age. It's just about creativity, innovation. Are you constantly changing, especially in response to how these elite quarterbacks play? And there's some similarities in DNA with those defenses. The use of simulated pressures, which is where you show blitz and then guys drop back into coverage and it causes the offensive line and quarterback to be confused. Both of those defenses, Baltimore and Kansas City, did that a lot this year. Now, Kansas City brought pressure more, which you saw in that game and in a creative fashion. But they're two of my favorite units to watch in football all season long because of the ingenuity on defense. The way they were constantly showing quarterbacks one picture and then changing the picture post-snap, sometimes, multiple times. I think you have to have, unless you have absolutely elite players at every level, and there's a couple defenses that are there, but you saw one of them in Cleveland, I think, struggle in the playoffs. That's what you want right now. You want a defensive coordinator who is going to use scheme to confuse quarterbacks, and both those guys do that really well.